2021, there was a state law that passed that essentially forces local governments to be a little bit more specific about their camping ban ordinances in regards to how and where people can set up tents. Right now, Portland does have a no camping allowed on public property rule, but it's pretty short and vague, and it doesn't really go into a lot of specifics. But this particular ordinance will essentially just be a little bit more thorough. So the ordinance bans camping from 8 p.m. to 8 a.m. on virtually any public space. So it's sidewalks, parks, areas with a lot of pedestrians, along roads that are deemed high crash corridors, so at risk of potentially a campsite being hit by a speeding driver. It also breaks down just how this will be enforced, as well as just some of the different penalties, and also bans the use of campfires and heating devices as well. So it pretty much is the state. It's in response to a state law, and it's basically making the city essentially just be a little bit more thorough in its rules in regards to camping.
And I should say this is something that Ted Wheeler actually proposed. So Mayor Wheeler, one of the at least big proponents of this potential ban, and clearly there's a lot of opinions on all sides of this. There's no doubt that this has been a concern for the people of Portland, the state of Oregon, even beyond in the U.S. Homeless and houseless populations is definitely a big concern. Camping ban is one part of that entire concern that people have proposed for maybe helping with some of the issue, or at least curbing some of the issue. What have been some of the viewpoints that you've heard so far as backlash on either side?
So backlash comes from a lot of different homeless advocates, homeless services, a lot of organizations that have day use services, so that provide meals or just spaces for folks to come rest during the day or access other services, are particularly concerned because if people don't have anywhere to go during the day, then those types of groups are expecting a large influx of people looking to use their services during the day, because from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. they won't be able to set up anywhere. So there a couple of those groups that I spoke with have said that they're hoping the city can step in and provide some financial assistance for them to deal with potentially larger crowds. On the flip side, the mayor and other city officials say this will speed up efforts of getting people who are living on the streets connected to services. A big part of this ban being enforced will kind of be in conjunction with Portland police, as well as outreach workers from the city. And judging from what we've heard from city officials so far, folks that they do come in contact with will be, offered services and be made aware of places that they can go. But this is still very much a day by day sort of task that the city's taking on. When city council likely passes this ordinance today, in a couple of hours from now, it won't take effect until July 1st, because the state law requires that this ordinance, that these types of ordinances be adopted by July 1st. But when the ordinance was released last week by the city, the mayor came out and said this will start to be phased in on July 1st. And considering how widespread the homeless crisis is in Portland and campsites all over the city, it's not going to be something where we see a vast change overnight. And the mayor himself has said that this is something that's going to be phased in.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it is, like you mentioned, a very vast problem. So how that is even going to be implemented, the actual process of doing that, I imagine, is going to be pretty complex, and there's going to be a lot of discussion about that as well. I know that you're going to be going out there today, so the timeline, as far as what we know, is the city council is convening at 2 p.m. for some other business, and then the votes maybe around 3. Is that right?
So we won't probably get a vote around 3. There's going to be a lot of public testimony for this. So the vote probably won't come until late this afternoon or even early this evening. There are some different groups that plan to be present to give testimony in opposition. to this. So it will probably be quite the large presence at City Hall this afternoon, and will really be a key moment in the homeless crisis in Portland.
Well, I know we're going to be speaking to possibly a few different people from different sides of the viewpoint. I know Scott from Blanchet House is going to be joining us here in just a few minutes as well to give their side of the situation and their feelings on the potential camping ban. Adrian, I know you got to get out the door. Really appreciate you taking a little bit of time here to talk to us. You've got lots of great reports there at kptv.com. People can take a look at, and we might hear from you later on today too, depending on what's going on down there outside of this event. Adrian, thanks a lot. I'll let you get to it.
Thanks, Greg. Thank you.
Right, again, appreciate Adrian being able to join us to talk about that. So just kind of just bringing down some of the facts here about what's going on. So this vote is taking place today. This is, it's scheduled to take place today. So Adrian mentioned there is a lot of public input where people can do that. There are some virtual opportunities to do that. There will probably be a lot of people there downtown going through that as well. Taking a look at some other feedback that's coming in, and again, if you're tuning in, this is Fox 12 Now. We're live from the digital desk, so depending on what platform you're watching, you can drop in your opinion as well. I know a lot of people do. Whatever that may be, you can let us know what that is. And one thing that just came out here recently, and I'm going to read this back to you a little bit. So this is a poll that came out from the GS Strategy Group, which was put together by People for Portland. So if you're familiar with them, they have been very vocal about many things. But this is the poll that they put out, where they said that as of, where they basically reviewed voters' opinions about the city of Portland when it comes to the homeless situation. They said, according to their poll, 75% of voters agree that homelessness in Portland is an out-of-control disaster. Again, this is their words. 17% of voters believe the situation was not great, and only 6% agree that homelessness is turning a corner and making progress. Again, we're taking a look at the poll results that came in from that. This is a pretty public one that they put out. They also stated that 67% of voters believe that for people in crisis, drug addiction and mental health treatment should no longer be voluntary. Again, just a poll. Coming from there, reading you what those results are according to them as far as what people have said. Now, we have seen a lot of studies that do show the city of Portland, the state of Oregon, and even beyond certainly consider homelessness and houselessness a very, very big issue. The causes of that have been debated for a lot of different ways of what could have been causing some of these issues. We've certainly covered a lot of these at KPTV, at Fox 12 Oregon. One of them is that people have said anyways, that potential of Measure 110 and how that affected some things. That is the measure that allows for basically some hard drugs to essentially be not prosecuted. So this has been part of the issue as far as, at least has been discussed with the police as far as arrests when it comes to that. Is that causing part of this? There's certainly a debate that could be had there. There's also mental health issues. So a lot of things that people have come up with as far as what could be causing the issue, but how to fix the issue is just as equally debated. And that is why today I think we're going to have a lot of opinions coming from each side on that. And again, you may have your own opinions one way or another. Somebody we're going to be talking to in just a few minutes will be Scott from the Blanchet House. Now, they are an organization that does help provide some respite for some people who are out on the street. So we're going to hear from Scott and his opinions about what this is going to mean. So this camping ban, as Adrian said, is probably going to get voted in. It seems that that's the way the city council is going to go. We won't know until later today. But once it is, what's next? What happens? How is it really going to be implemented? There are potential fines that are going to happen. That's at least what part of this proposal has, to where they would be warned several times, someone would be warned, and then a potential fine. And again, the ban would be from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. So this isn't at night, so this is during the day. This would be going on, and it would cover sidewalks, virtually any public space, if you really look at it. They even included streets where there's high accident rates. So there's a lot of places where this would be banned, but to actually enforce that will be another issue. So we're going to find out more about this as we explore this with you here today, and I'll give you some more information as we go through the day and talk about this. Why don't we do this right now? We've got a couple of other news stories here that we've run on KPTV that really sum it up a little bit more, and this is going to be helpful if you're learning about this, you want to get a little more education about where we're at. So we're going to play a couple of those. We'll get Scott here on the line and hear from Blanchet House as we could continue through here our coverage today. So let's go ahead and go to this.
The ordinance will be voted on by City Council next week and comes as the city works to quickly build sanctioned campsites and outdoor shelters. The proposal bars camping at all times on sidewalks, in parks, other areas for pedestrians near schools, daycares, existing shelters, areas that block access to businesses, or next to roads with high risk of car accidents. Any fires or gas heaters at camps are also banned. There will be written warnings for first and second violations, a $100 fine or 30 days in jail, or both for a third violation. Mayor Ted Wheeler says he's also open to different penalties that are supported by the DA's office.
I will support any efforts to create alternatives to criminal sanctions for violations. Whether it's acceptance of service referrals, completion of community service, or restorative justice participation, I'm fully behind creating pathways out of the system for those who want help.
This new ordinance lines up to a state law passed in 2021, which says ordinances must make sure the rules are reasonable in terms of where, when, and how a camp is set up, and the compliance must come in line by July 1st. Portland police and city outreach workers will enforce the new ordinance if it's passed by city commissioners. The city says shelter will be offered to anyone being cited before any warnings, fines, or arrests are made, and penalties will only be given to those who refuse shelter. In Southeast Portland, Deborah Gill, Fox 12 Oregon.
This new ordinance by the city all ties to a state law passed in 2021, which says these kinds of local camping ordinances must be in line with these state rules by July 1st of this year. There is no camping allowed at all times on sidewalks, in parks, other areas for pedestrians, near schools, daycares, existing shelters, areas that block access to businesses, or next to roads with high risks of car accidents. Any fires or gas heaters at camps are also banned. Mayor Wheeler saying in a recorded statement, this move by the city is needed now more than ever.
We must continue to develop workable and compassionate means to connect people to the services they need to get off and stay off the streets. We have to also update our city code to comply with new state laws related to homelessness.
The state law has prompted Portland to change its rules to ban all camping between 8 a.m. and 8 p.m. as opposed to an outright ban. There will also now be warning systems put in place for people camping unlawfully as opposed to immediate fines or arrest under current rules. Enforcement of the ordinance will also be overseen by the Portland Police Bureau and city outreach workers. The violations are written warnings for the first two violations, a $100 fine or 30 days in jail for the third violation, and Mayor Ted Wheeler says he's also open to different penalties that are supported by the DA's office.
I will support any efforts to create alternatives to criminal sanctions for violations. Whether it's acceptance of service referrals, completion of community service, or restorative justice participation, I'm fully behind creating pathways out of the system for those who want help.
The city says shelter will be offered to anyone cited before any warnings, fines, or arrests are made, and that penalties will only be given to people who refuse shelter.
All right, there we go. Again, talking about the potential ban that's coming up. And thanks for joining us. This is Fox 12 Now. I'm Greg Dubler, and again, appreciate you being here. So we're covering this vote at the City Council that's going to be happening later on today. We're going to be talking about what that could mean, what's going to happen, and what perhaps some of the opinions are about either side of that. And we're very lucky right now to have Scott from Blanchet House, who was able to take some time here today to join us. And Scott, I know that you've talked to us quite a bit about this before, but I just wanted to have you on here to get your opinions on this potential ban. And I guess to start off with, how do you feel about the potential ban, and what do you think some of the ramifications of this could be?
Yeah. Hey, Greg, thanks for having me on and for shining a light. This is going to be a very important day for Portland and for our community. So I think it's great that so many people are paying attention. I think the consequences is going to be more trauma and more heartache and more suffering for people who are already suffering. And look, I know there's enough suffering to go around in our community right now, and I'm not trying to discount that. And there are people on both sides of this issue. I agree with the mayor that criminalizing homelessness is not the solution. And if this measure passes, then we definitely have to find other ways of enforcing this. But let's be clear, the harm to people that we serve at Blanchet House isn't going to require enforcement. They are already going to feel the pressure of this ban and will react accordingly. And how will people react? Well, they will come to places like Blanchet House and the Portland Rescue Mission and Rosehaven and Join for day services. There aren't really that many of us providing these kinds of daytime support services. So you ask, what are the consequences? Of the many consequences is we're expecting as a program to provide services during the day, that we're going to get slammed with even greater need for services by a community that's going to be further stressed and traumatized.
So you mentioned Blanchet House being one of it sounds like not very many places where there are to go during the day. And this ban would be from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. So I suppose it would be, in theory, packing everything up for the day, then at night, potentially bringing it back somewhere. Looking at it from that standpoint, and it sounds like you think that might not be feasible, really, for a lot of people to even be able to do that. How do you feel about the potential enforcement of the issue?
Well, the enforcement piece, it makes me nervous, but we don't really have a lot of details about what that enforcement piece is going to be like. And I think, the mayor also alludes to the fact that on the other end of enforcement, we have a very strained and stressed criminal justice system, a shortage of public defenders, people who represent people who are incarcerated, a lot of mental health care already going on in jails, although that's certainly not the best place for people with mental health crisis to be. And let's be clear, a lot of the people who are going to be affected by this are people with profound mental health crisis, and also a good number of people with physical disabilities, people who are elderly. And so the thought that they are going to have to pack up all of their belongings and schlep it from one end of the community to the other, that's going to be very difficult for people. And part of the things that we're talking about at Blanchet House, because we let people bring their belongings into our cafe during meals, it helps them relax when they're eating because they're not worried about their stuff and whether their stuff will get taken or damaged. But the space is only so big. We can only accommodate so many belongings. And so we're trying to think through, how are we going to help people manage their belongings in a way that allows our services to not be impeded, but also allow people to believe that their belongings will be safe while they're enjoying a meal with us.
So for you today, what are you planning to say to the City Council? I know that you're going to be speaking there, at least virtually, if I understand, and correct me if I'm wrong on that. What do you plan to say to them?
Yeah, no, I am signed up to testify at the 2 o'clock hearing, and I'll be testifying virtually. You only get 2 minutes, which is not a lot of time. And what I'm going to do in my time is speak on behalf of Blanchet House and the other day centers, 3 of which I just mentioned a moment ago, about the impact that we expect to see. And in fact, the mayor himself has said that libraries and day centers will be a resource for people who are affected by this ban. And so what I'm going to ask City Council and the mayor is to support this. If we're intended to be part of the solution, and trust me, we have been part of the solution to this crisis for the past 3 years at great expense. And thank goodness for a lot of generous people who donate to support our services. But these day service programs, we don't get any county funding or city funding or joint office funding. We carry that lift ourselves. But as the weight continues to pile on our shoulders, I'm going to be asking City Council to help us carry that weight.
Well, and again, that vote is coming up today, so you're signed up there for the potential, or to virtually testify for the 2 minutes. And Scott, I know you've got a very busy day. I appreciate you being here, talking about this, explaining some of the concerns that you have over this camping ban, and letting us know where Blanchet House stands and what some of the potential implications, the ramifications of are for this, excuse me. So Scott, thank you very much for being here with us.
Greg, thank you for having me.
All right, again, we're walking through all of this right now, so talking about what some of the different implications are of this, and have several different people who may be joining us here throughout the day to cover this. And I appreciate you joining us wherever you are. So this is Fox 12 Now, whether you're finding us on YouTube Live or any of the other outlets that we're at, of course, our apps. So certainly download our apps on whatever platform you are on. To recap just where we're at, we had Adrian Thomas there at the beginning, just leading us up to how we got here, how we got to this camping ban that's been proposed by Mayor Wheeler. Again, the ban would be from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. And there are general guidelines on how it might be enforced, but that's kind of up in the air a little bit as well. So this is all leading up to today, where the city council is going to be having a vote on it. There's going to be a large amount of people testifying publicly about their opinions, one side or the other. Regarding that, we do know from some recent polls that, and that's just no doubt, that people are very concerned about the homeless and housing situation, and are very have strong opinions on one way or another. But regardless, it is certainly a concern. It seems like across the board for Oregonians, and definitely for people here in Portland and Multnomah County. So we do have more that we'll be covering, and that's going to be coming up here in just a little bit. I do have something else that I did want to pull up for you. And so we've covered a lot of things here on Fox 12 Now. One of the things that we did talk to was someone who was covering how potentially some other ways that people could actually help out when it comes to finding people a place to live. And of course, that's not pulling up right now, so just give me 1 second here and I'll pull that up for you. Again, we are live as we're doing this, and we will get that over to you. But this is a proposal from an interview that I had earlier this year, where it covers a potential $1,000 tax break to someone who would actually have someone live at their house. So this is if you have an empty room in your house. Again, this doesn't directly relate to this, but this is something else that we covered that I feel like would be something you'd want to hear about if you missed this interview that we had. So we're going to go ahead and play that right now. So this is from earlier this year, but this is earlier this month. And we'll take a look at that. So stick around. Here it is right now. Hello, everyone. This is Fox 12 Now. I'm Greg Nibbler, part of Fox 12 Oregon here, and I appreciate all of you joining in. Today, we've got something special that we're going to be talking about. So according to DHM research, houselessness and the lack of affordable housing is one of the biggest concerns that Oregonians have, especially going into this legislative season. They want to see some action on that. And there's currently a House bill that is being proposed that would actually incentivize people who do own homes but have vacant rooms to rent those rooms out. We're going to get into the details of that here in just a little bit, but right now I'm joined by Tess Fields, who is the Executive Director of Home Share Oregon. Tess, thank you very much for being here with us today.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
So to start off, you are with Home Share Oregon. I wondered if you could give us the backstory of that, what exactly that is, and what you do with that organization.
Sure. So Home Share Oregon has been up and running for just over a year and a half. We launched this organization as we continue to look at the increased numbers of people falling into homelessness or at risk of displacement. And we learned that there's 1.5 million owner-occupied homes across the state of Oregon with a spare bedroom available. And simultaneously, 1 out of every 3 Oregon homeowners are mortgage burdened, with almost 40% of Oregon seniors self-reporting that they're at risk of foreclosure. We felt if we could match these populations and penetrate just 2% of those homeowners, we could house 30,000 people affordably, help keep 30,000 people in their homes and build financial resilience with absolutely no new infrastructure and without raising taxes.
So with the organization itself, there's a few things I want to dig into there, actually, that you just were talking about. How do you go about, I guess, matching these people up?
Yes, most of the matching takes place through a technology application that we provide to Oregonians for free that they can access through our website at www.homeshareoregon.org. But basically, homeowners go in and answer a series of questions. Housemates go in and answer the same questions that, dig into everything from, do you work during the day or do you work in the evenings? When do you like for the quiet hours to be in your living arrangements? Smoking, non-smoking, lifestyle preferences in terms of interests and hobbies. And then what happens is the computer runs an algorithm and it matches homeowners and housemates and housemates and homeowners. And then from there, we provide free rental and lease agreements that have been reviewed by attorneys for folks to use, as well as free background screens that we recommend for each party to do on one another. For people that have a little bit of a more challenging time with technology, we provide direct case management services, and we actually help people fill out the application and work through the technology, and then also provide them with direct tips and tools in terms of finding their perfect match.
So going from the homeowner side, who would maybe have that room, like who's the ideal candidate for somebody like this, for something like this, for them to want to rent out their room to someone?
Well, most of the folks that participate in our program right now are women over the age of 50 that have experienced the death of a spouse or divorce. However, for homeowners, there's varying and sundry reasons why people would like to home share. Sometimes it's simply to build financial resilience. We're experiencing, a very, really kind of a crisis in terms of housing affordability on all ends. And then in addition to that, some people, would like some companionship. We find that specifically with our seniors. They're living, in a larger home, but they're the only ones there. They'd like, to fill up the space with some life and some noise and some company. And then other times people are genuinely concerned about access to affordable housing, and they want to be able to rent out rooms to people who, can afford, what is some sort of a reasonable rent, between $500 or $800 a month. They just can't necessarily afford $1,800 a month. And so they're genuinely concerned, and they want to get involved and be a part of the solution.
Looking at it from, I think that's really fascinating, just how those two different sides can match up. For the people who are looking for some place to go live, do you find this is mostly in urban areas? Is it rural areas, or is it really statewide?
It is completely statewide. I've actually been really just astounded at how much in demand the home sharing service is across the state. When we initially launched, naturally, we felt that the biggest, that most of the interest would be coming from the urban populations. However, I've worked nonprofit for the majority of my career, and what I share with my colleagues is, it's probably the first time I heard from all 36 counties within 2 weeks. We had people calling from the coast. We had people calling from Coos, Curry, Deschutes, Jackson, Josephine, Marion, Lynn, Benton, Lane, obviously, and then, clearly in the Tri-County area. But this is a statewide crisis. It's a statewide problem. It's impacting all income levels, and I think the response that the organization has had is reflective of that.
One thing I think that may be brought up, and I think you went through it a little bit, but I'd like to dig in a little bit more, is talking about matching up everyone. You have the system where people can fill out all that information. Is there ever any concern about safety issues when it comes to that?
Yeah, everybody, needs to be aware of safety issues and security issues. And I think that's one of the values that Home Share Oregon brings. Home sharing is not for everyone. But when people make the decision to do that, it's not an impulsive decision. We really encourage people to be, decisive about this, to be confident, to really know what they're looking for in a housemate, and what kind of needs they're looking to have met, and to really go through the process that we recommend, that we strongly recommend, which is, not just doing the compatibility matching, but also, meeting each other a couple of times, going through our really extensive home sharing agreement that doesn't just, cover, pay rent on the 15th and, whatever, but it really, really goes into the gamut of, when we have disagreements, how are we going to choose to resolve those disagreements? Are we going to text each other? Are we going to email? Are we going to sit down and talk about it? We have one senior couple that matched, and I like to use this example, but they even went into such detail that they negotiated sponges versus dishcloths, and one felt really strongly about that one way, and so it's just kind of this funny thing that they talk about. It's really, do I want a companion? Do I want someone I can hang out with and take a walk with, or do I just want a place to rent, or do I just want a person to live here and they kind of have their own thing going on? And getting really honest with yourself, and thinking about those things and going through the process and taking your time and putting all the steps into place. And once all of that happens, it's generally a really positive, rewarding experience for both people.
Something that we brought up there at the beginning is that there's also now, and as it says here on our screen, that there is a House bill that is being proposed, or is being proposed, that would essentially incentivize this a little bit more. Can you tell us about this bill?
Yeah, we're really, really excited about this. Oregon is a leader across the country in terms of innovative solutions. We have the bottle bill and, a number of other firsts. And, we really want to be the first across the country to start putting to work underutilized housing stock to address the affordable housing crisis. We feel House Bill 3032 is a great first step. It's a very minor adjustment in Oregon income state tax law. It basically states if you're, living in an owner-occupied home, so it's your permanent residence, and you decide to rent out a spare bedroom long-term, and we defined long-term by 3 months or more, then for $1,000 a month or less, then you're absolved from having to report that additional income on your Oregon income state taxes.
And I'm assuming that wouldn't have anything to do with the federal side of things, but that's up to then $12,000 a year that this homeowner could be incentivized for.
Yes, and I think if you're at the 9% income tax rate and you are actually charging $1,000 a month, your tax liability to the state at the end of the year would be right around $1,000 a year. And what we're, really recommending is, given the fact that we're 111,000 units behind in housing across the state, over the next 10 years, it's been estimated that we need to build, almost 500,000 new units. We really want to encourage people to become a part of the solution and understand that spare bedrooms are actually a part of the underutilized housing stock that is available out there. And we can't build our way out of this problem. We really have to get to work and work together as a community. So we want to see, any kind of tax liability, just absolved for doing this service for the state.
Where's the bill at right now in the process?
So the bill has been championed by Senate President Rob Wagner. He's incredibly supportive of this initiative. Also, Senator Minority Leader Tim Knopp on the Senate side, has also stated that this is a priority bill for the Senate minority, it's wonderful to see a bill that is supported bipartisanly. In addition to that, Representative Courtney Nearen, big shout out and thanks to her. She's our bill chief sponsor, as well as Representative Hartman. It has passed out of the Housing and Homelessness Committee, and it is now sitting in the Joint Committee on Tax Expenditures, which is co-chaired by Nancy Nathanson and Senator Mark Meek, and we are excited to get a hearing hopefully as soon as possible so we can get some movement on this.
And if it does go through, when would it go into effect?
In 2024.
2024. Real quick, just here at the end, and I know you went through these statistics earlier, but I just want to reiterate them again. Can you tell me, again, what you think this would do to help rectify some of this housing issues? You mentioned, we need to build 500,000 units, but how many people do you think that you could get into a home with this program?
Well, as I stated previously, there's 1.5 million owner occupied homes with a spare bedroom. And, what we've learned is, the biggest impediment to home sharing is really just that it's not the cultural norm. So this is something that, was fairly ubiquitous, many years ago. Many people took in boarders throughout their lives to help. It's one of the ways they stayed in their homes. It's one of the ways that a lot of people found housing, but, it fell out of popularity and fell out of favor for whatever reason. And so we're kind of looking to bring this old idea back. And, our goal is to incentivize at least 2% of those 1.5 million homeowners. We'd like to match between 3,000 and 5,000 Oregonians a year through the home share process. And I really want to share that the average cost to build a unit of housing, whether it's an apartment or a single family home, is $450,000, between $400,000 and $450,000. So that's $1 million to build 2 units of housing. There's other challenges that we have to address in terms of land supply, infrastructure development, you name it. It's a tough process. And we need to absolutely lead with production. And we are thrilled that the governor is prioritizing this and thank her for her work. However, we also understand we can't build our way out of this problem. We didn't get here overnight. And there's a lot of factors that have contributed to this. This is not. This is no longer just a low-income, issue where we just need to build more low-income housing. We're behind 111,000 units across all income levels. So this is everybody. And which is why we're seeing these increases in people that have never been at risk of displacement before, all of a sudden at risk of displacement. So, I guess that's kind of a long answer to sharing that our goal as an organization through the work that we're doing is to house between 3,000 and 5,000 people a year. And we want to drive that cost down to $500 per person served. And when you compare that number to how much the state has to spend to produce housing, as well as, rental subsidies and, housing navigators when people actually become displaced and need additional help. It's just apples and oranges. So we're really, really enthusiastic about this and are hopeful that we get a lot of support in the legislature.
For those that are interested in your program, what's the best way for them to go about getting involved?
So simply log on to www.homeshareoregon.org. And there's, if you're interested in home sharing, you can immediately sign up through the website. If you'd like to support House Bill 3032, there's opportunities to do that as well. But right now, we encourage people to call their state representatives and share that they support House Bill 3032. This is a really simple way to get people excited and motivated and galvanized, and to kind of light a fire, if you will, under the home sharing movement.
Well, Tess, thank you very much for taking some time today to talk to us about this and explain the process and explain the bill. Really, really appreciate it. So thank you very much.
Well, I really appreciate you guys having me, and thank you again for your time.
Absolutely. All right, so again, we are live here with Fox 12 now, talking about a few different sides of the issue that is really at the forefront for a lot of Oregonians and people all across the country, and certainly here in Portland and Multnomah County, and that comes to the homeless issue. So that was a previous interview that we've had just about another option, not necessarily for homeless people, but discussing the lack of housing, which is really at the forefront of all of this. So something else to recap. What we are waiting for later on today, coming up pretty soon actually. Portland City Council is going to be voting on the potential ban of camping for the city of Portland. And I'm going to kind of recap some of the major issues with this major points of this rather. So this is from Ted Wheeler's proposal. This is what the City Council is voting on later today. There's going to be some public testimony involved in that. But if it were to pass, here's what would be going on. So according to Ted Wheeler, the ordinance would be phased in starting on July 1st. So this isn't something that would be starting right away, immediately, but it's about a month. So it's definitely not a long time either. July 1st is when this potential ban would be happening. The ban itself will be banning camping from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. in virtually every public space. This is according to the proposal. So that includes sidewalks, parks, in front of businesses, near existing shelters, and near roads with frequent car accidents. So that sounds like that's a lot of places where this ban would go into effect. Also, any fires or gas heaters at camps are banned in the proposed ordinance. So in case you were wondering, that is part of this as well. The city says that unlawful campers would be given multiple warnings to move. So talking about the enforcement of it, how does this happen? What are the consequences if this ban were to go into effect, if somebody violating it between this 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. timeline? They would receive multiple warnings to move and then could be fined $100 or arrested. So this is in the proposal. That is how it would be enforced. Those are what the repercussions are if you were to violate this 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. camping ordinance. The city also says repeat offenders after this will likely be placed in a diversion program through the district attorney's office to find shelter or get help. So that's the next step after the fine, after the warnings, after all of that, that they would be placed in a diversion program. And the city also says shelter will be offered to anyone being cited before any warnings, fines, or arrests are made, and that penalties will only be given to people who refuse shelter. So the city is saying they're going to offer shelter for anyone who is violating this, to what they can go to. Now remember, it's 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. That's when the ban is. So these are essentially daylight hours. 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. That's when this ban is for. The vote is coming up here shortly, and we're going to be having Adrian Thomas will be down there, as always, covering this issue. He has done a lot of coverage on that. We're actually going to take a look at some of his coverage here in just a second, and we'll have Chandler down there as well inside. So we have lots coming up on this. We'll be bringing this live too. So if you are watching right now, whatever platform you're on, we'll have the actual city council meeting live here for you on Fox 12 now. Before we go down that, though, because we do have a little while until that actually gets started, I want to revisit some of the coverage that we've been doing here on Fox 12 now around this issue. There have been many polls, and I keep bringing this up, but there are so many polls out there talking about how homelessness, houselessness, all of that is at the top forefront. What are the biggest concerns, whatever side you're on, that people have? And there's even a recent poll that just came out that is really putting that up at about 75% of Multnomah County residents. So we're going to be talking a little bit more about those polls, but I want to revisit one of Adrian's topics and a discussion that I got to have him about urban alchemy. So you may have heard the term urban alchemy and wondered what that is. That is actually the organization, a nonprofit organization from LA that has been contracted with to the city of Portland to provide up to 5 shelters, camps, whatever your definition, whatever your term is, that would be run by them that would allow people to have a place to stay within those. There are 2 already that have been contracted here with the city of Portland. They have the option for more as they go through it. Well, Adrian actually went down to LA. This was about a month or so ago, went down to LA and took a look at the organization there. I talked to him here on Fox 12 now and went into a discussion with him about that and about his experience. So let's revisit that moment here because it's certainly very relevant to where we are right now. I'm going to play Adrian's initial coverage there from LA, and then we'll go into a discussion about it. So let's continue on with that. Discuss this a little bit more, go in depth with it, and find out what it is that's happening with this company and what could be potentially happening here.
Sleep Village in the South Central neighborhood, just minutes from downtown Los Angeles. This site will be similar in size and structure to what will be set up in Southeast Portland this summer. You can take a look at the site just here behind me. This is what it looks like from the outside. Those who've benefited from Urban Alchemy say they're grateful for the second chance at life the organization has given them, but reported problems at other sites and unhappy nearby business owners have raised questions. Regardless, this organization is set to have a huge presence in Portland over the next several years in the city's fight against homelessness. We met Cheryl Monaco at Urban Alchemy's Lincoln Safe Sleep Village in Los Angeles. She's been in the site for 2 months after experiencing homelessness in Los Angeles the past 4 years.
It's rough. I was robbed, I was raped, my car was stolen, I had all my identity stolen, my husband's ashes were stolen. These people brought me in because, I needed a safe place to be.
Cheryl says Urban Alchemy has helped her start fresh. Right before the pandemic, she says she lost much of her close family, had health issues, and ended up on the streets.
Every one of my family members died, and then my husband died. And I just couldn't handle it. I lost everything during the pandemic. I lost my home, I lost my car, I lost my motorhome, but now I'm rebuilding. You know, I gotta not think about those things that I've lost and stuff.
Yeah.
And know that my family members are watching over me and want me to do better. And
Cheryl says simple things like 3 meals a day, a clean bathroom and shower, her own space, and a caseworker or care coordinator helping her get documentation to start the process of finding housing has given her hope.
when I first came here and they gave me my tent, I cried. I was like, thank you so much. You know, I got my own little place to stay and everything, you know.
We also met Dolores Flores in the dining area. She's been at the site for 7 months and says Urban Alchemy provides a refuge from the risky day-to-day of living on the streets of Los Angeles.
I'm very, very, very grateful for this place. I lived out on the streets for almost 2.5 years. I've been raped, I've been beaten, and so me being here, I feel protected. Urban Alchemy just came to an agreement for a 5-year, $50 million contract with the city of Portland to operate up to 5 mass campsites. Right now, the group is planning to operate at least 1 site in southeast Portland, which according to Urban Alchemy's proposal will cost $5.1 million per year to operate. With the large contract, Government and Community Affairs Director Kirkpatrick Taylor says the group is poised to grow in Portland and help those on the streets, but also stick to its core values of providing jobs to those who've recently gotten out of prison.
What's that going to look like over the next several years? Are you guys planning to operate up to 5 sites possibly?
Yeah, so while our services center around homelessness, the real role of Urban Alchemy is to create career pathways for the formerly incarcerated. We believe that the success that we've been able to see is because we actually center them in leadership, center them in decision-making places, center them in the middle of the work, and it allows us to really make progress and touch the issue in a way that probably we've not seen before. And so our hope is if we are successful, if we are able to show results, and if we continue to build rapport and respect with the community, both housed and unhoused, that we don't have any reason to not continue to grow.
The Lincoln Safe Sleep site has been open for about 1.5 years, and business owners we spoke with here in South Central say at first it was a rocky start. Now there's mixed emotions. Steve Robertson is a South Central native and owns a burger and wings restaurant. He says he isn't thrilled about Urban Alchemy's presence and says the mass campsite was jarring for the neighborhood, but he says he and others have adapted.
With me being a businessman, it gives me some headaches sometimes, but with me being a person who understands the neighborhood, I learned how to understand the situation.
He says whenever there have been incidents related to residents in Urban Alchemy's site, both Urban Alchemy staff and other residents are reminded of the expectations by South Central residents and have generally been receptive.
We always step back and tell them, when you're in this neighborhood, you do as this neighborhood do. And you're going to keep the peace in this neighborhood.
A few doors down, boutique owner Eloisa Torres told us earlier in the week she feels differently and says the campsite has brought issues to the area.
Ever since they came in, it got ugly, as in the way that 2 of my windows got broken. My door got broken too. People already think South Central is ugly because of the name. It's like, it's not like that, but if that's the situation, it gets harder, like to let them know it's not ugly.
Back inside the Lincoln Safe Sleep site, Kirkpatrick Tyler acknowledges Urban Alchemy turns heads every time a site is set up in a community. Urban Alchemy has also faced legal troubles tied to other sites it operates, and Tyler says he knows this may make some question the group's credibility.
What do you say then to some of the critics who maybe have looked at issues with sites in other cities that have made the news, or possibly other homeless service providers who look at the work you guys do and are skeptical? What do you say to all the critics?
Yeah, I think we always welcome skepticism. That's healthy, right? It makes for a good conversation. It holds us accountable. It allows us to be, genuinely responsive to the questions people have. I would challenge when folks look at some of the reports that have come out, one, that they're usually editorials.
Tyler says despite the issues that have come up with the group, the success and rapid growth of Urban Alchemy speaks for itself.
You're always going to have critics. I think when you look at the work, when you talk to the people, that by and large what you find is that we're not perfect, but we try really hard. We really love and respect the folks that we serve.
Cheryl Monaco says anyone experiencing homelessness should open their minds to the opportunities Urban Alchemy can provide.
What would you say to folks who are either living on the streets or may have never heard of Urban Alchemy before, who have questions about this organization and maybe are skeptical? As somebody who's benefiting from them, what would you say?
I'd say bring it on. Bring it on. Come on down here and try it out. If you don't like it, you can leave anytime you want. You know, I mean, they got showers, they got charging stations, they got food, they got water.
And again, that site is set to open in Southeast Portland early this summer. It's unclear at this time when and where other city-sanctioned mass campsites will open in Portland. In Los Angeles, Adrian Thomas, Good Day, Oregon.
All right, so there we go. Watching that whole report, Adrian, obviously joining us here now live on Fox 12 now. That's a lot that you covered there just in that amount of time, but I know you were down there for a while. And before we get into some of those specifics, you know, could you walk us through what it's like going down there to report on something like this? You know, what did you go through? What was that experience like even to get these interviews?
So what we had to do is we initially just reached out to Urban Alchemy just through their general media inquiry. I mean, they're just their media inquiry page. They are pretty established in both Los Angeles and San Francisco, so quite a lot of local outlets down there have done coverage on them. But we basically just reached out and, you know, I told them who I was and, you know, how they're coming to Portland and that the whole community has a lot of questions. We really want to see more about what they're doing and whatnot. So, yeah, it was just a lot of back and forth for about a month, but we were able to get this shoot set up at one of their sites in Los Angeles that is going to be very similar to what will be in Portland. And yeah, we went down there, and you know, I think, as I mentioned in some of my series of stories, that LA obviously has a huge homeless problem of its own that it's dealing with. It's it's Portland. It's similar to Portland, but obviously there's a lot more people involved. It's a lot more larger of a geographical area. But you know, it was just really interesting to see how, you know, they're going to bring this to Portland. But you know, one stark difference I think that I noticed just being down there and seeing what, you know, the issue looked like for the unsheltered homeless population. There's just certain pockets of the city where it's just huge. I mean, it's, you know, Skid Row south of downtown. I mean, we were there for a little bit, just kind of, you know, seeing what that area looked like. And I mean, it was thousands and thousands of people, you know, camping on the sidewalk. And you know, in Portland, and one of the Urban Alchemy staff actually said this when they were announced as the provider back in March of the sanctioned campsites. They said that Portland is, you know, the unsheltered homelessness is more spread out throughout the city, whereas in places like Los Angeles and San Francisco, they're kind of more isolated to certain areas, and we certainly noticed that in our coverage.
How did that feel for you going in there as you know, as far as a reporter and being in the middle of all that, you know, this concentrated area, safety concerns, you know, what was that part like?
Well, we were pretty safe the whole time. I mean, it was, you know, especially some of the areas where it was highly concentrated, you know, around downtown, there actually are a lot of different, like, mobile medical clinics, different homeless service providers, like out on the streets, like all the time. So, you know, a lot of these areas were pretty busy, and, you know, there were just lots of different people kind of going about their day, a lot of different service providers actually out there helping people. So, I mean, yeah, as far as safety goes, you know, we were totally fine. And, you know, the Urban Alchemy site specifically, that's in South Central, which is kind of a little bit more residential, more neighborhood like. There were some businesses actually
kind of in the area that had just their own like private security. So it was all fairly safe, but I could get how like from the outside it could be a little jarring at first.
So talking about the Urban Alchemy Center, just specifically, and obviously the city signing the contract, City of Portland signing the contract, so that they're going to be coming here. Going to that, and I know you had some great interviews there with some of the, I don't know, residents, the right word, but people who are staying there. Does this seem to be like it's really tackling the population that's local to that area, or are people from across the city finding themselves going to this Urban Alchemy Center? Because you mentioned, there's different pockets and populations on the LA side. Are they traveling to this, or is it really just kind of taking care of what's locally right there?
So it's kind of a combination. That particular site was first come, first serve. So, I mean, anybody could show up there. But they said, if they didn't have space, then, they would call kind of one of their partners with the city to see which shelter sites had space, that kind of thing. The site that's going to be opening up in Portland, at least at first, is going to be by referral only. So it's my understanding it's going to be outreach workers employed by the city that, are going around to some of the more like problematic campsites, offering these people these services and referring them to the sites. It's not going to be kind of a walk-in sort of place like the one where we were at in Los Angeles. Another major difference to note too is that the city has confirmed that the site in Portland is going to have 140 sleeping pods or pallet shelters, and some space for tents. So it's not going to be this kind of mass tent campsite, but more these pallet shelters, like they're essentially just little, permanent structure, sleeping pod sort of things. That was something that the city had to guarantee in order to get state funding for these mass campsites. And we asked Urban Alchemy about that, and, they said that is kind of a logistical thing that the city is handling, but they also said, factoring in how Portland is a lot more rainy than, than California, that's another reason why, like, they're obviously open to the idea of the pallet shelters. But, that site too that we were at had 90 tents, and the one that's going to be in Portland is going to have 140 of the pallet shelters and then extra space for tents, but we'll be able to accommodate up to 150 people. So definitely will be a little bit larger than the site in Los Angeles, but similar in, just overall size and structure.
So with those, you have the pods, you'll have the space for the tents. What are the kinds of services are they planning to provide here? Is it the same as what they're doing down there? A little bit different here in Portland?
Yeah, it's going to be pretty much the exact same. I mean, folks will be able to have 3 meals a day. They have, access to clean bathrooms, clean showers. There's going to be a large staff of several dozen people who work as Urban Alchemy staff in the campsite, whether it's people who are, cleaning, providing the meals. There's, more advanced staff positions called care coordinators, which are basically caseworkers. So, they'll each have, and then this is the same in the Portland and Los Angeles site. So the caseworkers, they have, a group of people that are essentially their, clients, if you will, and kind of just meet them where they're at and help them with whatever they're dealing with, whether it be a physical health issue, mental health issues, substance abuse disorder. If they don't have documentation like an ID card, social security card, they help them secure that documentation, because having documentation is key to eventually getting into housing or getting employment.
So that's a lot that's kind of going on right there that they're going to be providing. Looking at it, what are the part of your other interview was talking to the community, the neighborhoods and those businesses and their thoughts on it. Can you expand on that at all? Is there anything that didn't make it into there that you'd like to talk about? Because I'm really curious about how they feel about it.
Yeah. I mean, like I said, it was very mixed. I mean, the gentleman we talked to in the video who owned the burger and wings spot, he wasn't happy with it at first. I mean, he's still not happy with it, but he says, we just have to adapt because this is the situation right now. And He feels like that he and other longtime residents and business owners in the neighborhood have established a good rapport with, people who live in the site and Urban Alchemy. But there were other business owners we talked to. We talked to some off camera who didn't want to go on camera with us, but they said that it's really just brought lots of chaos to the neighborhood, and it's hard to tell for them when there are issues if it's people who live in the site, or perhaps what they have claimed, some of these business owners, is that people who live in the site attract friends or other family members to come to the neighborhood and camp out in cars and RVs, and they're all together. So they actually bring in people to kind of on the outskirts of the neighborhood and of the campsite. So, we observed maybe a little bit of that, like several blocks away, but no indication that was really tied to the site. But that's a valid point from those business owners. I mean, but some of them have said that they are dealing with a lot more vandalism now that site is there. But it's going to remain to be seen what it's going to actually look like and how that will pan out in Portland. It just seems like every neighborhood's going to be different, every site's going to be different. So we'll just have to see what it looks like and how nearby business owners, nearby residents, nearby homeowners, people who live in apartment buildings feel once the site actually goes up in Southeast Portland.
Right, and will it even be that much different? There's a lot of huge homeless population anyway around there, so I don't know if that changes things. Like you said, we'll have to see. One thing, with Urban Alchemy in particular, I know that they've had some legal issues that have happened in some of their other sites, which probably is common with these kinds of organizations. I don't know. You're dealing with a lot of people, and sometimes people are going to be upset. But can you talk to us a little bit about their specific issues?
Just some of the specific issues that in other cities. Yeah. So one of the sites that stands out was that Kirkpatrick Tyler touched on. This is a lawsuit that made the news, was in Sausalito in the Bay Area. There was a group of essentially people who lived in a site there who they got together and they filed a lawsuit against Urban Alchemy alleging mistreatment, and there ended up being like a settlement of sorts. And when Kirkpatrick brought that up, he said there were two sides to it, and he obviously is going to defend the organization that he's representing. I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that, there are a lot of people employed by this organization, between 1,100 and 1,200. And, I think each site is going to be different. I think each staff member is going to be different. Urban Alchemy acknowledges what they're doing and what they're trying to do is a risk, because it's an approach that has never been taken before. You're hiring hundreds of formerly incarcerated people, people who were formerly living on the streets in these high-level staff positions, to run these sites. And it based on some of these issues in other cities, it probably gets very volatile at times. But from our observations from the site we were at, everything seemed fairly harmonious.
What are the next steps for them here in Portland, as far as when they get started?
Well, set up, they're essentially getting it set up. And from what we were told is the first site would be ready to go by early summer. They didn't have a concrete date yet, but they were kind of floating around a month and a half, something like that. We don't really know a concrete date at this time.
Any other things that you want to share just on a personal level? You don't have to, obviously, but just going through this experience, that's quite a lot that you did there over those however many days you were down there in LA. Just overall, did you have any kind of thoughts or feelings that you came back with from it?
Yeah. Well, I think what I took away is that homelessness, regardless of the city that it's in, is a massive, massive, massive humanitarian crisis. We're experiencing it here in Portland. Obviously, California is experiencing it big time. And, I think
for me, it is. I think what I gleaned the most just covering this as a reporter is that homelessness, specifically innovative solutions like with what the city is touting with urban alchemy, is very polarizing. It's a very, very polarizing topic. You're going to have people who think it's a great idea, who think it's this is at least something, while more affordable housing is being built. But then obviously you're going to have other people who float the term homeless industrial complex, and that this is a waste of taxpayer dollars. You're going to have people in the neighborhoods where these sites are built who get upset. So it's there's a lot of different perspectives on this. And I think, as I continue to cover this and other reporters, I think if we can just, share as many of those perspectives as we can, and just, really try and paint a whole picture of each organization and different people involved. I mean, hopefully that can bring a little bit more clarity, but it's a very layered and complex topic. It's not very black and white.
Yeah, polarizing for sure. There's not a whole lot. I mean, there's a lot of things that are polarizing right now, but definitely, whatever solution comes up, there's going to be, like you said, somebody who's completely against it, somebody's completely for it. So, but reporting like you just did, going down there and actually being there in person, seeing what's happening there is so valuable. So just, really appreciate you bringing that in and getting those perspectives, from everybody that was on there. Some of that's really heartbreaking stuff. That's happening, and so it's just it's good to hear those sides of things, whatever it may be, and get some better ideas on it. So Adrian, thank you, for taking some time here today too. I know you're very busy covering a lot of other things, but to talk about this a little more in depth, I think is really appreciative and very valuable. So Adrian, thanks, man. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, thank you, Greg. Appreciate it.
So. All right, again, that was Adrian Thomas with more of his great reporting, going down there to LA to take a look at the Urban Alchemy Center down there. And the two have been announced for here in Portland already, up to, I believe, 5 or 6 total. So there are more of those coming up. But all this coverage here today is taking a look back at some of the stuff that we've already done, but also leading up to what is coming up. And that is the Portland City Council vote taking place very soon, sometime probably after 3. We'll have all that coverage here. But before we go for right now, I do want to revisit a couple of things that I mentioned there during talking to Adrian about some of the polls that came up regarding Oregonians' opinions on the homeless situation. And this is from DHM Research. We've had John Horvick on many times to talk about some of the research and polls that they take. These are across the board demographically, geographically, urban, rural, all of that. They cover everybody and kind of get some consensuses that come out of that. And there's a few that I wanted to highlight that have to do with the homeless issue. One of them was that most Oregonians are optimistic that homelessness can be solved in their communities and support diverting money from the state's rainy day fund to do so. One of the things that they ask people, that seems to be that most people, again, not everyone, most people are optimistic on that. Another one that stood out, which I think is pretty obvious, given where we're at today, homelessness and housing are identified most often as the issues Oregonians want the legislature to prioritize in the 2023 session. And that's talking about as a statewide, we're discussing the city side today, but as a state, that is what most people want addressed as far as one of the number one issues when it comes to that. And again, we've talked to John about this. This was across the board. There's the urban-rural divide, or whatever you want to call it, Democrat, Republican, however people align. This was across the board things that people wanted to take a look at according to their poll. And also, a majority of Oregonians feel homelessness results from mental illness and drug addiction. And then it subdivides into that, but that was a majority, so 56%. So that's associated with it. Just some information to take a look at. We've got reports about this at KPTV.com as well that you can see, or DHM Research, but giving a little more insight into the feeling of everybody right now. Now, coming up here for today, for what's going to be happening, I'm going to tell you just a little bit more of a recap of what's going to be going on here with this Portland City Council meeting and the vote that they're having. So the vote is going to be on the potential camping ban that would last from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. in virtually every public space. That includes sidewalks, parks, in front of businesses, near existing shelters, and near roads with frequent car accidents. So it sounds like pretty much everywhere, 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. there would be no camping allowed. So tents, whatever it is that's set up, wouldn't be allowed. Any fires or gas heaters at camps would be banned in this proposed ordinance. Unlawful, so the enforcement side of things, it would be that unlawful campers would be given multiple warnings to move and then could be fined $100 or arrested. So you would get multiple warnings, and with those warnings, they wouldn't fine or arrest anybody that refused what they said they're going to offer, which is that they will be offering a place for them to go. So they are going to offer that, and if somebody refused that, then that is when they could face some of those penalties. So where is it those people would go? Well, that's also part of the issue. Earlier we talked to Scott from the Blanchet House, saying this will really tax the resources of a lot of those organizations or organizations similar to Blanchet House. Could it be with Urban Alchemy? You know, there's a lot that's unknown with that. We don't have the answers to that. Maybe we'll find some after this is passed, and that is what we're going to be covering here later on. So you're watching Fox 12 now. I'm Greg Nibbler, and we're live here on YouTube, on all of our Fox 12 Oregon apps. If you don't have the Fox 12 Oregon apps, download those apps. You know, if you're on Roku or Fire TV or Apple TV, we're on all those. Download those because you can watch us live, but then you can also watch back a lot of our segments that are on there and some other great things that are part of that app, including our regular news programs. So definitely get those. Follow us on YouTube, follow us on our apps, follow us everywhere else. But where you're watching us right now, this is where you want to come back to, because coming up, we will be broadcasting the City Council meeting live, and that will be happening shortly, around 3 p.m. It could happen sooner, though. We also have cameras outside of the event, so there's a lot of coverage coming up right here, and this is the great place to watch that leading up to our 4 p.m. news coverage. So we're going to bow out right now for a few as we regather and wait for that. But make sure you have your notifications on, you have your apps downloaded, all of that stuff. And wherever you are, this is where we're at. So we appreciate you being here with us. All right, we're going to bow out for right now. For Fox 12 Now, I'm Greg Nibbler.